I have not done a Q&A in a very long time, so here we go, off the cuff. I have not read these questions yet. Let's see what people are asking. What are your thoughts on the Microsoft and Activision Blizzard acquisition and its impact on Nintendo and PlayStation? Oh boy, okay. Look, I've been actively not trying to cover this stuff, to be honest. If you follow me on Twitter, or if you just keep up with my videos, you'll notice that it's not a thing I really talk about very much. And honestly, a large part of why I haven't is because of the fact that I don't feel like I have a personally strong horse in this race. When it comes to just the concept of a really big company buying another really big company, it's just been a very much of a mess of a situation, and I'm honestly not sure which outcome I would prefer. I'm not a fan of Bobby Kotick, and so him getting out of control of Activision Blizzard and maybe having that overall company head in a different direction while still maintaining a lot of their strong IPs is something that I would like to see happen. At the same time, though, I don't know if being acquired by another already large company is necessarily the best thing for that. It was already really wild to see Bethesda get acquired by Microsoft, and I'm really curious what the long-term ramifications would be of if Activision were also acquired. That said, because I don't feel that excited for either possible outcome, I've just really not enjoyed the show that has been going on as a result of it. The constant going back in courts, the leaked messages between companies, the way that different information has been twisted. It's just become a lot of fuel and fodder for console war argument stuff that I just get really tired of. And there is actually some interesting information I think has come out of it that's worth talking about and covering. For instance, we just recently learned what other companies Xbox was curious in acquiring at some point, either before they acquired Activision or afterwards. Bungie came up, which obviously is not an option anymore as they're in partnership with Sony. I think the bigger one that a lot of people kind of had their eyes drawn to was Sega, because that was always such a huge rumor for such a long time. Whenever people talked about if Microsoft were to acquire a Japanese company, Sega was one of the first ones people would bring up because of the history those two companies have together. And that is something that I would have been very curious to see happen instead of our current Activision news cycle, because it's just been going on and on and on. As far as how it impacts Sony and Nintendo, honestly, I don't think it really impacts Nintendo all that much. Activision Blizzard was already pretty much ignoring the Switch as often as they could. They put some titles on there. I mean, we did get an Overwatch port, but in general, not a lot of Activision Blizzard games have made their way to the Switch. And when they have, it's very late or delayed ports. They don't really have that close of an active working relationship with Nintendo as it is. And if anything, if they do get acquired, we might see some of those games come over, which could be interesting. As far as how it impacts Sony, I mean, that's basically the basis for the constant arguments we've been seeing right now about the acquisition. At the end of the day, I think Xbox would stand by their word as far as releasing games like Call of Duty across all the platforms made available, Sony included, but it's undeniable that there would be some advantages that would come from them having it in-house. For instance, how the game could be optimized, or having unique DLC and bonuses that are already things that happen anyways with the current Call of Duty on PlayStation. Honestly, the whole thing is just this kind of mess where I don't think anyone's going to fully understand or appreciate the full ramifications of what an acquisition like this could do until we're actually 5 or 10 years in the future and can look back on how it is actually played out. And until we actually have a resolution and end to this case, it's just an absolute mess. Real quick, as you may have noticed, these questions were sourced from Twitter. That's where I've been asking these most recently. So if I make a habit of doing this some more in the future and you want to ask some stuff, make sure to follow me over there, as well as subscribe to this channel. I think I'm going to get back into doing these more. Do you think Xbox needs a controller with more modern features like haptic feedback, adaptive triggers, and a gyroscope for motion aiming and shooters and such? Yes. When talking about the Xbox controller versus the DualSense, one of the things that I've talked about in the past is how I like the base layout of the Xbox controller more. I have just found that to be more comfortable for me personally, but when it comes to special feature list, the DualSense has a lot of stuff going on that I really love and enjoy, primarily because I'm really big into having interesting forms of feedback in games and things that can up the immersive factor. And while Rumble has always been kind of a safe way of doing this, the more advanced haptics of the DualSense have opened that up even further, as well as having things like the built-in speaker, the adaptive triggers, all that kind of stuff, the things that I personally really enjoy. I don't think enough games fully leverage it as much as they could, but the times that it has worked out, obviously the really great example of this is the game that was meant to showcase it in the first place with Astro's Playroom, is wonderful, and I want to see more games really lean into that, and it would be great to see Xbox also take advantage of those kinds of things. In particular, while I don't actually make that much use of it personally, motion controls are definitely a big deal for a lot of people. I know quite a few players now where that's actually become their default method of aiming for playing FPS or third-person shooters on console when it's an option. And so Xbox not offering that at all right now definitely feels like a missed opportunity and something they need to play a little bit of catch up on. So, the Elite controller existing as their premium, more expensive option, great, but there's a lot of, I think, features that are becoming a little more standard now that their baseline controller needs to catch up on, and I would hope to see happen sometime soon. What are your comfort games? Comfort games. Comfort game is a weird term for me because I feel like we've had this whole movement lately of people focusing more and more on the concept of like cozy gaming, and a lot of stuff that falls into that genre doesn't actually feel that comfortable or cozy to me. Like, I don't really play a lot of what I would call sort of longer term investment games where you just kind of do what you want on a day-to-day basis. Stuff like Animal Crossing, all the different farm sim games. Stuff like that has never really been that comforting for me. I think it's because I always try to end up playing them the most efficient way possible, which isn't really what you're supposed to do. Honestly, when it comes to comfort games for me, I don't go back to too many titles that often. There are a few specific ones, oftentimes because it's one that I'm so familiar with. There's just this kind of, I don't know, almost comfort in just doing the routine of playing through it again. Skyrim is a really good example of this. Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind is actually my favorite Elder Scrolls game overall, but there's something about Skyrim's very just easy introduction and fast way to get to the gameplay that has made it something that I just dive into all the time randomly. I don't even do that many different things in the run through. It just kind of, I don't know, feels nice to play it again. That, and there's a handful of JRPGs or platforming games that I go back to a lot. Chrono Trigger is always a fun one to revisit. Also Chrono Cross, despite the fact that people did not like that one as much. Love playing some Shovel Knight or some of the classic Mega Man games, the original Mega Man X in particular. Those are ones that I definitely see myself going back to a little more often. What are your speculations on the next Nintendo system, and do you expect it to be released 2025? The new Nintendo system question. That is definitely something that's been on a lot of people's minds lately. I've been trying not to make too many videos constantly talking about this because I know there's a lot of speculation out there. People are just looking for every crumb they can on what Nintendo has going on next. Honestly, my chief speculation about it is that I really don't know what Nintendo's gonna do. I feel like Nintendo's one of those companies, while there are certain things they do and certain habits that are predictable, a whole lot of other times they'll just kind of go the route no one's expecting, whether that's introducing the Wii and how that worked out, and then following up with the Wii U and how that worked out, and even introducing the original Switch. One of the things about Nintendo is they kind of just do what they want to do, and it doesn't always align with what seems like the obvious market choice or what their competitors are even doing. So honestly, I think that's one of the big things for me when it comes to talking about next Nintendo hardware is a lot of people right now are fixated on the concept of like a Switch 2, and don't get me wrong, I agree. I think a Switch 2 would be fantastic. I think a more powerful system that still focuses on the hybrid concept would be a great way to go. And there is some kind of historical tradition of Nintendo normally doing systems kind of in pairs that does make a certain sense. But at the same time, I would not be that shocked if Nintendo came out of nowhere and was like, hey, we're going to keep supporting the Switch as is, as our hybrid console on the side, and here's our new next-gen hardware that isn't a hybrid system, but instead a more traditional home console, but with some other new interesting gimmick, like now you can smell what's happening in the game. I don't know, it's just, Nintendo always wants to do what they want to do, and until we actually get like a hard confirmation of what the next thing is, I'm not putting much stock in any major theory right now of what the next system is going to be. Which Nintendo property do you think will come to theaters next? Which one do you want to see? Well, I feel like the obvious answer right away there, right, is Zelda. I mean, Mario is, of course, the main Nintendo franchise, but if we're going to talk about any other one that's huge, Zelda is one that I think could be potentially very interesting. There is a little bit more of a traditional story structure to Zelda games that might better adapt into a film-style movie. I don't know if I would want it to necessarily be a 3D CG-style movie like Mario was. I think that worked out for Mario, especially because the angle of making it, very kid-oriented. I think Zelda, while obviously you could make it kid-oriented, I feel like maybe there's a little bit more of a teen to adult demographic that would appreciate it. I would actually love to see something that's a little bit more of a sketchier 2D style, or if they do want to go the kid direction, I was actually having this conversation with someone recently, something like what Leica does with stop motion would be a really interesting look if they wanted to lean more into, say, like that Link's Awakening style aesthetic. Aside from Zelda, which I think is the most obvious answer, I think Metroid would be really cool. Metroid owes a lot of its actual inspirations to movies. Alien played a very very large role in how that game was kind of atmospherically designed. And so maybe something there that's a little bit of a different tone, maybe a little darker, a little creepier, could be something really cool. If it wasn't going to be Zelda, I think Metroid would be my primary answer there. Which 3DS games would you like to see on Switch? A lot. The 3DS is such a great library, and there's so many wonderful titles. Look, if you've actually watched me talk about like games specifically and not just hardware, you'll know that RPGs are really heavy focus for me, and the 3DS has a lot of wonderful ones that I would love to see not be trapped on just that system, or at least the DS line of systems, because there are a couple that got remade and are on just those two specifically. Off the top of my head, it would be great to see Nintendo port a bunch of the Fire Emblem games off of there. Fire Emblem Awakening and Shadows of Valentia, both in particular, are fantastic. Fade's not as much, but still I enjoyed, so it'd be cool to have that off of there. Radiant Historia is a wonderful JRPG, one of my favorites that I feel like doesn't get talked about nearly enough, primarily because it was trapped on the DS and 3DS, so having that on modern consoles would be great as well. And in a similar vein, there's a lot of Shin Megami Tensei games that are trapped on the DS and 3DS line of systems. Devil Survivors, which was like this tactics game with branching plot that was super cool. SMT4, as well as its sequel, 4 Apocalypse, which honestly, as far as the mainline ones go, I think 4 actually is my favorite, so that would be cool to see on other platforms as well. There's a whole lot of other genres too that I think have great games to offer. It'd be great to see another Kid Icarus happen, or even just an updated version of the 3DS game. But when I think 3DS, I immediately jump to all the great RPGs that I hope can make their way to other platforms eventually, so more people get the chance to experience them. What are your favorite games this year so far? Also, what games are you anticipating for the remainder of the year? Oh, okay, so far this year, look, I think there's a couple obvious wins that I just have to mention really quick. Tears of the Kingdom obviously was a really big hit. I don't know if I feel that guaranteed in it being my Game of the Year pick just yet, but I did still really like it, and it was great. I'm almost finished with Final Fantasy XVI as of this recording, and while I do have some opinions in terms of like that versus what I like out of traditional Final Fantasy, at the end of the day, I think it's a wonderful game, and I'm absolutely loving it. Like a Dragon Ishin and Street Fighter VI, both fantastic games. As far as upcoming stuff, honestly, there's a lot this year is really jam-packed for very specific game series that are my thing. Armored Core finally coming back, so Armored Core 6 is a huge deal for me. I can't wait for that. Baldur's Gate 3, I've been playing the early access for that for a long time, and so I've been really excited to see the actual full game launch later this year. If you've seen me rant at all about indie games, Sea of Stars has been a huge one for me. It's actually one of the few videos I put up on my side channel, was just talking about the demo for that and how much I loved it, so that's been one of my most anticipated games. And then I definitely also have to shout out Starfield, because again, Elder Scrolls has always been a really big series for me, Morrowind one of my favorites. I also enjoyed Skyrim a lot, and so them taking that formula and adapting it to a sci-fi space exploration game, especially after everything we saw at that recent Xbox showcase, yeah, I am very excited to see where that goes. Honestly, there are so many games I'm excited for that doesn't even get close to completing the list, but those are some of the immediate highlights that jump in my head. I'm sure I'm gonna look back at this video and go, damn it, I should have talked about blank. Favorite Like a Dragon game and why? What franchise would you like to see a Musou spin-off for, and why? Ooh, 2 questions. Okay, I'm gonna be quick on one of these and a little longer the other one. For favorite Like a Dragon game, probably 7. I really like a lot of the Kiryu era stuff. Zero is probably my favorite in that one, but at the end of the day, I like turn-based RPGs, and I absolutely love Ichiban. He has quickly become one of my favorite protagonists just overall, not even specific to Like a Dragon, just in general. Awesome character. As for Musou games, there's honestly so many different cool collaborations that could happen. I think one of the things about the collab games they do that makes them so fun is that you can just tap into a series that has a rich history and just pull all kinds of fun fan servicey references for it. That's one of the things I really love about the Hyrule Warriors game they did, what I enjoyed about the first Fire Emblem Warriors game they did. There's a lot of franchises they could tap into for this, right? Final Fantasy, huge history of a lot of amazing characters they could pull from, and they've already done bizarre crossover storylines anyways with Dissidia, so it's not that wild of a thing for them to do. It'd be kind of a weird fit, but Mario I think could be really fun, especially because there are a lot of characters that maybe shine in 1 or 2 specific games, especially things like Mario RPG and Paper Mario, that they could have a chance to shine again in a big crossover game that's Musou style. Honestly, I would just love to see more and more of those style of games happen, because like the regular mainline Dynasty Warriors and Samurai Warriors and Warriors of Roshi and all that stuff like that, it's fun, but the collab ones are definitely the games I get a lot more excited for, and I want to see a variety of more titles, not necessarily just sequels to ones that have already been established. What are your thoughts about the rise in popularity of gacha games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, etc.? What do you think they mean for the future of non-live service games, and would you ever play them? I do in fact play them, not as often as I really should. It's usually when I go on a trip or something, I finally have a moment where I just go, well, I guess I'm gonna dive into this mobile game and put a bunch of hours in just this weekend, and maybe I'll revisit it in a couple months. Most recently, I did that with Honkai Star Rail because the weekend it came out was the same time I had to go to a wedding out in Colorado, so that was really great timing. Look, I'm not gonna be one of those people where I'm just like, oh, mobile gaming is bad and gacha is terrible and just, you know, deal breaker entirely. I absolutely do think there are cases where the genre is handled better or worse in some particular games. Some are definitely much more predatory in their design than others are. At the end of the day, I enjoy playing some of them as time killers. I personally, at the same time, do not want that to be something that becomes, you know, the concept of live service entirely replacing more traditional games. I mean, this has been a popular talking point with Sony lately, right? Is that a lot of PlayStation game popularity lately has been focused on their single-player titles, but their most recent showcase did lean very heavily into all their upcoming attempts at making live service games. I think live service stuff plays a certain role, but at the end of the day, most people are only going to really invest their time into only so many all at once, and so it's a market that can get much more easily oversaturated than, say, single-player games where you can play it, finish it, and move on to the next one. I don't mind it as being an option out there and something that coexists alongside it, but if we were going in the direction of a future where everyone starts only doing live service stuff, yeah, not a thing I want to see happen. So that's it for this month's questions. Again, I actually am thinking about doing this as like a regular monthly thing again, or at least, you know, maybe once every 2 months. So if you want to make sure you ask questions in the future, follow me over on Twitter, subscribe here as well to not miss out if you're not already subscribed. As always, if you enjoyed the video, hit thumbs up to let me know, and I'll see you guys later.